the radical Democratic base has now taken over the entire party because there are no centrists left who are running for president in 2020 in the Democratic Party. It's amazing to watch as members of the media label random members of the Democratic coalition centrists. So they've been making the claim that Kamala Harris, the senator from California, is the new centrist. She's a centrist voice, as opposed to Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders. Now, the reason that they are saying that is because she had a history as a prosecutor. So that means that naturally she is more centrist than a lot of the other Democratic members of the coalition. The only problem is she isn't. And she served as a prosecutor because she felt that would be a gateway to higher office. But the reality is that Kamala Harris is every bit the radical of Elizabeth Warren or Bernie Sanders or Alexandra Ocasio-Cortez or anybody else who you think is the face of the radical Democratic Party. Now, she's getting hit from the left today. And the reason she's being hit from the left is, again, because of that prosecutorial career. There's a clip going around of her speaking at the Commonwealth Club in San Francisco. Really nice group of folks. And it's a clip of her back when she was Attorney General of the state of California, talking about how she used to prosecute the parents of kids who were truant. Here's what she said. She said, "I believe a child going without an education is tantamount to a crime. So I decided I was going to start prosecuting parents for truancy." Well, that was a little controversial in San Francisco, and you can actually see her laughing in the tape. She says, "Frankly, my staff went bananas. They were very concerned at the time. We didn't know at the time whether I was going to have an opponent in my re-election race. I said, look, I'm done. This is a serious issue. I've got a little capital. I'm going to spend some of it." And this is what we did. We recognized, as a prosecutor in law enforcement, I have a huge stick. The school system has a carrot. Let's work in tandem around our collective objective and goal, which is to get those kids in school. Well, the internet was going nuts over this last night because the suggestion is that Kamala Harris was going after parents of kids who are truant. And really what you require is a social worker in these cases. You don't require a police officer. Now, it's kind of fascinating to watch as the left resonates to Kamala Harris despite her record in this particular area. It is also important to note that when she says something should be tantamount to a crime, you as Attorney General do not get to decide what is and is not a crime. You do not get to decide that everything you don't like is now enforceable by the police. If you do, that makes you a centralized government control tyrant, and Kamala Harris does have those tendencies. But all of that is being pushed to the side by the fact that Kamala Harris is an intersectional candidate. She's female, and she's black. And that means that she must be a great, great candidate, even if she's spouting the same nonsense that all the other Democratic candidates are spouting ad nauseum. So last night she did a town hall on CNN, and it was just a wonderful example of CNN, again, playing host to a propaganda piece on behalf of a Democrat. So she's in front of a group of people, probably, 400, 500 people maybe. And I love that CNN was like, she did this in Des Moines, Iowa. And CNN was touting this online. Like, wow, look at the crowd Kamala Harris can draw. Not to be self-centered here for a second. I have not spoken to a crowd smaller than 500 people in probably 3 years. Okay, and I'm not a senator from California. So it's pretty amazing that people are now touting this as an example of her ability to get people out there. I mean, CNN's broadcasting this thing live. You think CNN is going to be interested in hosting an event that has a bunch of empty seats in the background? In any case, she was asked a bunch of questions about policy, and she proved just how radical she is. So she was specifically asked about private health care insurance. So she is a proponent of Medicare for all. The Bernie Sanders plan that would cost $32 trillion over 10 years. It would double the size of the federal government, and it would also destroy the private sector. Now, there are a lot of folks who say, well, Medicare for all wouldn't destroy the private sector because health insurance would still continue to exist in the private sector. But according to Kamala Harris, she actually wants it to destroy private sector medical insurance. She believes that everybody should be thrown onto government care, that you shouldn't be able to buy private sector health insurance. Because once the taxpayer is footing the bill for Medicare, number one, there's not going to be a ton of money left over to pay for private healthcare insurance. Two, most people are going to be getting their healthcare insurance through the government of the United States. And three, if you have private health insurers competing with the federal government, that's not good for the federal government, because the federal government is then going to have its care rejected. This is the great hole in a lot of these systems. You can have supplemental health insurance in a lot of nationalized healthcare countries. For example, in Canada, you can get supplemental health insurance, although it took a while for them to allow even that. In Israel now, you can finally get supplemental health insurance. In Australia, most people have private supplemental health care insurance. Medicare for all in Australia is really just for basic care. But for full proponents of Medicare for all, people who believe that the government should cover all costs, it's going to come down to rationing. And it's going to come down to banning private health care insurance. Because remember, let's say that there's a private health care insurer, Blue Cross Blue Shield or something, and that private health care insurer can offer doctors a better reimbursement rate than Medicare, well, who do you think the doctors are going to look to in order to get patients? Are they going to look to Medicare, or are they going to look to the private healthcare insurers? That's why many countries have outright banned private healthcare insurance. They don't want to compete with the private sector. They want to crowd the private sector out. So Kamala Harris was asked specifically about this, and she came down full scale on the side of nationalization of the healthcare system and full scale destruction of private health insurance. Here's Kamala Harris doing just that.
I believe the solution, and I'm actually feel very strongly about this, is that we need to have Medicare for all. And you don't have to go through the process of going through an insurance company, having them give you approval, going through the paperwork, all of the delay that may require. Who of us has not had that situation where you got to wait for approval and the doctor says, well, I don't know if your insurance company is going to cover this? Let's eliminate all of that. Let's move on.
So, in other words, 95% of people in the United States have health care from their insurance company via their employer. If you like your doctor, you will not be able to keep your doctor. If you like your plan, you will not be able to keep your plan. She wants to take all of those things directly from you. I mean, this is a massive segment of the United States economy. If you think that you're going to remove legitimately like $1 trillion from American industry with no questions asked, and that people are going to be supremely happy when you take away their health plan, then think again. And think about Obamacare. You know, Obamacare is a piece of crap legislation, but the thing about Obamacare is that Obamacare was purportedly about trying to help people in the individual market. If you had your health insurance program through your employer, Obamacare theoretically did not touch it. Now, that's not true. Obamacare did regulate the insurance companies and make it nearly impossible for you to get the same level of care at the same cost as you did before. It raised healthcare costs across the board. But it was specifically driven by the needs in the individual market, people who had lost their jobs and had a health problem and now couldn't get health insurance. But it was not directed at destroying the entire system. Kamala Harris, Bernie Sanders, these are folks who want to destroy the entire system from the very center of the system. They want your plan to be gone. They want your doctor to be gone. It was an amazing statement by Kamala Harris to just come out and say that part. She said the quiet part out loud. Now, everybody knows that that is where this is going, but everybody is pretending that that is not where this is going right now. Right, here's what Kamala Harris actually said. She said she felt very strongly about Medicare for all. And then, when she was pressed by Jake Tapper, if that means eliminating private insurance, she said yes. She said yes. She said the idea is everyone gets access to medical care. Okay, and then she said, let's just get rid of it. She said, let's just be done with it. Well, I'm glad that she can summarily dismiss 25% of the American economy right off the top. And by the way, the part of the economy that also happens to generate all of the medical innovation, that also happens to generate all of the profit incentive for doctors to go into the industry in the first place. Democrats are incredibly extreme on this stuff. All Trump should do for the next 2 years, if Kamala Harris is indeed the Democratic nominee, is play the clip of her over and over and over again saying she's going to take away her health care program. She's going to take away her health insurance. And let's see how the elderly feel about that. Let's see how you feel about that when she says she's taking away health insurance for your child so that you can work with a government bureaucrat. I also love the suggestion by Kamala Harris there that the solution to all of your paperwork ills is the federal government. Since when has that ever been true? Has there been any area of American life in which your life has been made simpler by the federal government? Like less paperwork? I highly doubt it. But that wasn't her only extreme statement of the night. She was also asked specifically about guns. And she said that we should basically ban all semi-automatic weapons in the United States.
There is no reason in a civil society that we have assault weapons around communities that can kill babies and police officers. There is no reason why we cannot have reasonable gun safety laws in this country. And guess what, guys? Here's the reality of it also. We're not waiting for a good idea. We have the good ideas, an assault weapons ban, background checks.
Okay, so, she then went on and she specifically said, you know what we should do? We should force legislators to look at autopsy photos because, and this is the ugliest part of American politics right now, the idea that if you disagree with Kamala Harris about her gun proposals, it's because you just don't care about the children. If only you cared about the children, then you would agree with her that all semi-automatic weapons in the United States, when she says assault rifles, she means semi-automatic weapons, that all semi-automatic weapons in the United States ought to be banned or confiscated outright. You are talking about hundreds of millions of weapons in the United States. And she suggests that if I oppose her stupid policy, then that's because I don't care about dead kids. Here she is doing this routine.
20 6- and 7-year-old babies were massacred in Connecticut. They failed to act. Here's what I think. I think that somebody should have required, and this is going to sound very harsh, I think somebody should have required all those members of Congress to go in a room, in a locked room, no press, no one, nobody else, and look at the autopsy photographs of those babies. And then you vote your conscience.
Okay, so we're going to force them to look at the pictures Kamala Harris wants them to look at in order to get them to change their mind. Okay, fine. If she wants that to be the case, then how about this? How about every Democrat in the United States Congress has to look at a picture of an aborted baby at 22 weeks, and then they can vote their conscience on free choice. Then they can vote their conscience on whether it's okay to slaughter babies in the womb. But people on the left would say, well, that's an emotional appeal. That's not a logical appeal. Well, that's exactly what Kamala Harris is doing there with regard to slaughtered kids in classrooms. The suggestion that I'm supposed to give up my rifle because something bad happened to kids not perpetrated by me and whom by somebody I would have attempted to stop if I'd been there with my gun. Kamala Harris making the case that we should ban all assault rifles in the country. So far, we're going to ban private health insurance, and we're going to ban all semi-automatic weapons in the United States. But that's not all from Kamala Harris. She also continues by saying that we should basically ban all private vehicles in the United States. She said she backs the Green New Deal, right? This is the new fresh thing among Democrats, is the Green New Deal. Now, as you'll recall, the Green New Deal is this purported piece of legislation that would radically shift the nature of the American economy. The idea is that within a decade, we would be completely carbon fuel free. We would no longer be using gas. We would no longer be using coal. We would be carbon neutral. And the idea here is that we would require a vast shifting of how the American economy works. The cost on this Green New Deal, by the way, would be $18 trillion over the course of the next decade or so. Oh, sorry, I'm underestimating. The Green New Deal, according to PJ Media analysis, would cost $49 trillion in the first 10 years. Right? That's an amazing, amazing statement. But it doesn't matter. The entire left has decided to resonate around all of this. The Green New Deal would include a federal jobs program. It would include getting rid, basically, of all private cars. And here is Kamala Harris supporting it.
We've been hearing more about a Green New Deal to fight climate change. You have yet to fully endorse or reject it. Will you fully endorse the Green New Deal tonight?
I support a Green New Deal, and I will tell you why. Climate change is an existential threat to us, and we have got to deal with the reality of it. All children need to be able to breathe clean air and drink clean water, and we've got to have a commitment to a policy that will allow that to happen for ourselves and our children and our grandchildren, and right now we don't.
That Green New Deal that she is endorsing right there requires cutting the United States military in half, ending 87% of U.S. energy, and banning cars. Okay, so that is the new program that she is supporting, Kamala Harris. Very exciting stuff. If you think that this is mainstream thought, it is inside the Democratic Party. I mean, it's pretty astonishing. It's pretty astonishing. So far, ban guns, ban private health care, and ban cars. But at least we know she's a moderate. That's the really important thing, is at least we know that Kamala Harris is a big moderate, according to members of the Democratic Party. Then finally, Harris got to her prosecutorial record. So as we say, she's pandering to the left. She's just as left as Bernie Sanders or Elizabeth Warren. And she was asked specifically about her prosecutorial record. And this is where she's going to have a little bit of trouble with the radical left inside her own party.
I compare my record to any prosecutor, any elected prosecutor in this country, in terms of the work that I have done to reform the criminal justice system. I am a daughter of parents who met when they were active in the civil rights movement. Nobody had to teach me about the disparities in the criminal justice system. I was born knowing what they are. I made a conscious decision to become a prosecutor because I understood if we're going to reform systems, yes, there is going to be the power that we have on the outside, and also we need to have people on the inside where the decisions are being made.
By the way, the question she was asked was why she did not support a bill requiring her office to investigate fatal shootings involving police officers, and her answer was, I'm black and that's why I became a prosecutor, which is not a good answer. Okay, so she's going to get flack from the left and from the right on her prosecutorial record. The good news is that the flack from the left is only going to last so long as the media focus on the question, which is to say, not long at all. They're instead going to focus on the radical leftist policy she takes on, for example, border security. So she was asked last night about her position on a border wall. And she said something so radical that most Democrats, I would think, disagree with it, which is that she will not be in favor of a border wall under any circumstances, even if it means guaranteeing the legal status of so-called dreamers who are already in the United States.
Let me be very clear. I'm not going to vote for a wall under any circumstances, and I do support border security. And if we want to talk about that, let's do that. And let's talk about what really accomplishes border security, which is let's upgrade the technology. Let's look at the fact that the folks who are working on border security on the ground know that they need upgraded infrastructure around things like drones, and they need cameras. So, yes, I'm all for increased border security where we need it. I am not for a wall.
Okay, so she still can't explain what kind of border security she wants, just something about drones and cameras, but that really doesn't solve any of the question. And saying that she would leave the Dreamers hanging, specifically to avoid Trump's program, is pretty amazing stuff. There's an article in the New York Times today that does point out a serious flaw for Kamala Harris. I've pointed out her prosecutorial record here a couple of times. It is too right-wing for the left and too left-wing for the right. Well, the New York Times has an article today talking about how that could really impact Kamala Harris's race with regard to black voters. So the title of the piece is, Can Kamala Harris Repeat Obama's Success with Black Voters? It's complicated. They say interviews with more than 30 black voters and political leaders in early primary states like South Carolina and her home state, California, show that Ms. Harris faces challenges. She'll have to persuade black activists skeptical of her record as a prosecutor, overcome sexism and a bias on the part of some voters that a female candidate cannot be President Trump, and work to gain broader support from black men who generally expressed more wariness about Ms. Harris in interviews than black women. She would also need to win over left-leaning young black voters, some of whom were ultimately disenchanted by Mr. Obama's presidency and may value political ideology more than racial solidarity. So she does have some problems in this race. The good news is she may be able to pander her way out of it. So the way she's going to pander her way out of it is by invoking stupidities like mansplaining. She's going to explain that everyone who opposes her is just a sexist. So she was asked about mansplaining last night in a typical left-wing question. Here is the charisma-free Kamala Harris.
Given what occurred in 2016 and the current political climate, that a male nominee will have a better chance this time around than a female nominee. Would you please respond to this so that this man has a response ready the next time a man tries to mansplain why a man would make a better nominee?
The people who vote, the people who live in this country are smarter than that. They're going to make decisions based on who they believe is the best leader. They're going to make decisions based on who they believe is speaking truth, who is doing it in a way that gives people dignity, doing it in a way that elevates public discourse as opposed to bringing us to the lowest common denominator and base instincts. That's how the voters are going to vote. And that is going to be the basis upon who will win.
You know that the question is really hard-hitting when the candidate stands up and applauds the question. I love guys who ask women about mansplaining. That guy, that's a real man's man right there. That guy who asked her about mansplaining. Solid stuff. So that's really exciting. Kamala Harris was also asked about how she would stay on message debating President Trump. Once again, her answer was less than inspiring.
Well, first, it's very important that anyone who presents themselves as a leader and wants to be a leader will speak like a leader. And that means speaking with integrity. It means speaking truth. It means speaking in a way that expresses and indicates some level of interest and concern in people other than oneself.
Okay, honestly, I think that if she ends up being the candidate for the Democrats, I think Trump has